This is the Unregistered podcast, and I'm Thaddeus Russell. This is a show about ideas, people, and behaviors that are considered inappropriate, out of bounds, or beyond the pale. The things you're not supposed to talk about if you're a school teacher, a college professor, a businessman, a politician, a parent, a neighbor, or even a podcast host. These are the things you're not supposed to say or even think if you're a good liberal, a good conservative, or a good citizen. Each week, I'll interview a person who has something bad to say. They might be a journalist or a professor. They might be a porn star or a drug dealer. They might just be an ordinary person with an ordinary job who doesn't care about the rules of polite society. I'm not interested in breaking the rules just to be a troublemaker. I'm interested in people who break the rules of conventional thought and to expand the scope of what is possible to say in our society. I'm interested in people who make me think. My guests this week are two Jewish Israeli teenagers who, in a society in which devotion to the state, the military, and the current war against the Palestinians in Gaza are all required, have refused to serve in the Israel Defense Forces and are willing to go to prison for it. This is my interview with Einat Gerlitz and Iddo Elam. I am joined from Tel Aviv by Einat Gerlitz and Iddo Elam, who are, it must be annoying people talking about your age all the time, but we have to in this case, right? I know it must be so annoying to be always called the young person, the teenager, the this age person, but you're 17, is that right? And Einat, what are you now? I knew, are you 19 now?
I'm 20 years old.
20 years old, all of 20 years old, okay. You two are part of an organization called Meservot, which is a organization in Israel. You can tell me what it is, but I think it's an organization that supports conscientious objectors. And you two have refused to serve in the Israeli Defense Forces. And not 2 years ago, is that right? You did it?
A year and a half ago, yes.
A year and a half ago. That was so before the current Gaza war. So
wait. Sorry.
21?
Yeah, a year and a half ago. Yeah.
Right, because we just changed years, so it
gets the war and everything.
Yeah. So, and you spent 87 days in prison for refusing to enlist in the IDF. And Iddo, in December, just a month and a half ago, I think, you announced, all of 17 years old, still in high school, that you will refuse to enlist in the IDF. And you're waiting, they can't do anything about you because you're still in high school. They're waiting for you to graduate and then some action will be taken. And there are other members of your organization who have done similar things, who have spent many months in prison. And currently, I know about Tal Mitnick. I don't know if there are others, but Tal Mitnick is in prison as we speak, I believe, right? And this is his second time in, and he's also 18 or 19 years old.
18.
He's 18 years old.
Right. I first heard about you all because of Tal, and that was a few months ago. He was on some live stream here, and I very randomly saw, and I was so blown away that such a thing existed in Israel right now, especially right now. And then I found out about more of you, and I learned about your stories individually. And so let's start with your stories. Why don't we talk about, I guess, let's do it again. Again, I'm sure you're tired of this, but October 7th, the day of October 7th, and how you all experienced it differently than other Israelis. Go around. I mean, Einat, want you to start. Like, what was it October 7th like for you, especially as someone who was already very famously a part of the peace movement and the anti-war movement? As an Israeli, that must have been even more alienating, but tell us the story. What was that like for you?
Yeah, it was tough. The night before Friday night, I went to visit my grandparents. They live in a kibbutz 5 kilometers from the Gaza border.
Oh.
And I was debating if I should stay for the Shabbat to sleep at their house. Last minute, I decided to go back home to Tel Aviv. So waking up to the sirens was really scary. We didn't really understand what's going on. It took time until we understood what's going on with my grandparents. And also, like, there were a few factors here. There were my grandparents that I was very scared of, and it took a few days until they were able to leave, until we convinced them to leave their kibbutz. And I had, on the other hand, friends in combat that were sent inside of Gaza pretty fast. And I had our Palestinian partners in the South Hebron Hills that we were hearing that it's becoming really crazy. And if usually there's no law, now, like October 7th and the weeks that followed it, there completely was no law. It was very, very scary. Crazy violence and live shooting. So having all those different kinds of communities and people that are important for me that I was very worried about, and also running from sirens all the time. And then as time went by, starting to see the news of what's going on and seeing like the terrible massacre that was going on. And it was very, very terrifying, very surprising. And it was very scary to hear. And then seeing how things went on and seeing how this eruption of violence wasn't ending, and also especially like feeling very alienated. I think that probably Iddo can also resonate with that, with a feeling that, like, we know that when you hold people under a siege for so many years and for over a decade, and when there is people live under violent occupation, you can't expect people to say thank you and be quiet. And I think we were very I was very shocked with the amount of violence and that happened on October 7th. But also I was shocked that other Israelis were surprised that there was a reaction from Gaza. And it was, and it continuing until today. It's scary to see how this circle of violence is just getting worse and worse. And the scariest thing to me is to see how people believe that the way to bring back the lives that were murdered on October 7th is by flattening Gaza and continuing to kill more people and to create more and more broken families. And so it's a tough experience that's just continuing all the time. And we are more privileged sitting in Tel Aviv, but living in this area at this time is very scary.
Yeah, I bet. Iddo, you were 17, I guess, then, on
Yeah.
October 7th, in high school, senior year, I suppose. And
Yeah.
were you already a committed activist in that way at that point?
Yeah, I started being an activist like 3 years ago already, when I was 14. It started off like,
young.
yeah, it started off like small time activism, like going to a few protests here and there, and being in some youth groups. But yeah, since the reform, the judicial reform and stuff like that,
Right.
it kind of ramped up. And because I'm also 17 now, it kind of got merged with the fact that I want to refuse, because my time is almost here to enlist.
Yeah. Yes. So, yeah, that's right. People forget that you all were very, very busy last year before October 7th, protesting against the Netanyahu government, for various reasons, but essentially for being dictatorial. Huge protests, right? Weren't those the biggest protests in Israeli history? I think they were. Giant protests. Yeah. And this is before October 7th. So what was that day like for you, though, Iddo? What was you woke up in the morning, and because it happened like at 6 a.m., right, for you guys?
6:30, yeah.
Yeah.
I just woke up at 6:30 to like a siren. I haven't heard, I think, sirens in a year, in like 2 years or something. It's very surprising to hear sirens in Tel Aviv also, with no prior event happening. So yeah, I woke up at 6:30. I went to the shelter, and then I just like couldn't understand really what was going on because like it does not happen in like in a vacuum. It's if there is sirens in Tel Aviv, there's always something much worse somewhere else, whether that be Gaza or the West Bank or East Jerusalem.
Right.
So I sat down with my father to watch the news. We opened up the news, and there was already like a special broadcast. And we, after a while, started seeing the like first images and first videos from, I think it was Sderot, the like Israeli city, which was literally a video of a Hamas van full of people shooting at Israeli police. That's something that I've never seen. Like I lived through like a few operations in Gaza. I lived through rocket attacks, but we are not used to seeing Palestinian resistance actually going through the border. Like that's insane for us. So it was really just shocking to see that. And at first it was because it was shocking and because there was no information, it was almost like something to laugh about. Like we did not understand what's going on. And you started seeing like people that have
It seemed as
Hamas
if it's not
outside.
real, as if it's
Yeah, exactly. You see people like joking on social media about the fact that Hamas is outside their house. Like nobody thought, because nobody thought that it will like continue for hours. People would thought that in 30 minutes to an hour, the whole event will stop. So it was really, really shocking. Then, of course, immediately a state of war was declared. And first of all, I am in a high school. High school stopped. For the first month or so, we just didn't study really. Later on, we started Zoom meetings and stuff like that, and now we're completely back. But at first, so I had a lot of free time with nothing to do because everything was shut down. Every day there was a rocket attack, so we couldn't like the shops were closed, the restaurants were closed. I couldn't work. I work, for example. And after a few days and in the first few weeks, we started seeing what's happening in Gaza, what the IDF has started to do in Gaza. At first, of course, it was only airstrikes. There was no ground invasion, but seeing that seeing that and that mixing up with starting to realize what happened in the kibbutzim is really, really, first of all, confusing and also like really, really depressing. Yeah, just depressing because as an Israeli, you still don't understand like what happened to people you know in the kibbutzim. We have friends over there that luckily were okay. You have friends over there though. You have also family friends that are not, that their sons now are enlisted in the army. And you still don't know what happened there. We still didn't even know how many were abducted. We just heard like rumors. But then you also start seeing like whole apartment complexes completely destroyed to the ground in Gaza. So yeah, just a feeling of deep depression for the first few weeks.
Yeah, and especially like as peace activists and as we're big believers in practicing nonviolence resistance. And I think both like us and also our Palestinian partners felt in the beginning very clueless and it was very scary, like that feeling that we like what can we do in this situation. It was very scary, and also there were a lot of political arrests of Palestinians that are Israeli citizens, also of one Jewish Israeli citizen for political reasons, for speaking up against the war. It was sentenced as supporting Hamas, but in reality, if you look at the cases, It's just going against the war in general. And so as peace activists, we felt very silenced and very scared to speak up. In the beginning, most of us were very silent, and we just like stayed together and tried to support each other. But there were like, as time went by, there were different kinds of initiatives that started. I was active in Jaffa. We did a joint Jewish Arab guard to support each other with both protective presence and helping families that were that lost their jobs. Many Palestinian Israeli citizens lost their jobs because people didn't want to hear Arabic in their workspace, didn't want, like, for racist reasons. So supporting them and bringing food and like basic necessities. I have friends that went to the South Hebron Hills to be with our Palestinian partners in these scary times. And as time went by, we got back to protesting to stop the war, protesting for political agreement. Both me and Iddo go to those protests that we're doing in Tel Aviv, calling to stop the genocide, to stop the war, to create a political agreement for the long term that will that will serve all of us, both Palestinians and Israelis, and first of all bringing back the hostages, which is crazy that people are going in the streets to protest for that when it's supposed to be the first priority, and it seems like it's not a priority for the government. So we're out in the streets protesting, but it took time until we felt that we're able even to do that, because it was very scary to speak up, to say that anything that's different than the mainstream militaristic Zionist propaganda.
Yeah, let's talk about that, about how scary it is and was. So I've actually seen videos of both of you in protests, I guess in Tel Aviv. I've seen multiple videos. I've seen both your faces at protests with, I don't know, it looked like maybe 20 or 30 people were with you protesting.
Depending. It depends.
Every week
Sometimes
is different.
Tell me,
Yes.
I want to know how many
Sure.
people actually do this. Like,
I mean, at first, like Einat said, like, we did not protest because even the chief of the police force said, if you want to protest against this war, we'll put you on buses and take you to Gaza. Like, he did.
wow.
Protesting was not on the table.
Wow.
Yeah, they called to intimidate us, so we won't, like, to scare us that we won't protest. And we did try to do, like, the first protest that we did against the war was in front of the Tel Aviv police station, when there were political arrests of political leaders of the Palestinian society in Israel. And we came to protest, and there were 20 arrests in like 10 minutes. And they were crazy violent. So that was our first experience, and it's been a long process. Like, now there's, I don't know, we don't know how many, maybe hundreds or thousands of people in protest.
Yeah.
Against the government, yes. Now every weekend, like, there is the anti-government, basically the same people that were protesting against the judicial reform are now protesting against the Netanyahu government. Those are a few thousand. They kind of have, like, you know, the anti-government people, and also like the hostage families that are demanding the government to do something. But the specific block that we have of anti-war activists in Tel Aviv, for example, in good weekends, it can even be, I would like to say, 100 to 120 people. And on bad days, it can be 30, like you said. But that, for example, in the judicial reform protests, we had the anti-occupation bloc that we both
were hundreds.
Activists of. Yeah, we were hundreds. People, like, we started off also like maybe 50 people, but by the end, by like this start of the war, maybe, we were already sometimes 400 even on good days. And also, like, we had branches of the anti-occupation bloc in all cities that did have protests. So many of the people that in the past were willing to say that they are anti-occupation are now not willing to voice their opposition to the war, because we are threatened by police, by right-wing activists, by the government. Like, the government is full of the people that want to stop us, the people that are telling people that we are supporters of terror, you know.
When we're peace activists, which is absurd.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, right. No, you're responsible for the death, don't you know? I mean, that's what they say, right? And I was actually gonna say, I mean, I was gonna ask you guys about the first weeks, and even today, I mean, still, like, you must have had in your mind that anyone who knew about you would have thought, in part, you are responsible for this, right? I mean, people like you, the tiny little peace movement in Israel that's left, you know, you're part. I would think many right-wing Israelis, and even not right-wing Israelis, would blame you in part, right? I mean, if the youth refuse to serve in the military, the entire Zionist project is over. If there are more of you, it's done. You can't have this thing anymore. But have you felt that? Was that ever? I know you don't feel guilty for it, of course, or responsible, but that must have been in your head in some way, that people think I'm responsible for what's going on here.
Yeah, of course. I mean, to add on the point that we were not even public with our opposition to the war. That's not only like protests. I'm known in my school to friends and also like random people in my school as like the peace activist, the lefty anti-occupation person, because I post a lot on social media. I sometimes write posts for our organization like Misarvot, and I sometimes just post on stories on Instagram, for example. And that couldn't happen at the start of the war, because people were getting arrested for posting something on their story, like Palestinian citizens of Israel. Yeah. Palestinian citizens of Israel, and were arrested for liking an anti-war post.
I saw that.
So we basically went completely silent publicly, because people do know me, and some of those people that do know me might think that I am pro Hamas, pro killing Israelis or something, even if I just post stop the war. So yeah, that went through my mind a lot, because I was like kind of shocked that I cannot say anything, not even in the street, like even on my personal accounts, even to friends sometimes, because friends might not like me being against this war, because I'm lucky to be in a pretty liberal city, but a lot of the people here, the moment it comes to security, the moment it comes to the Palestinian question, stop being liberal and do not accept that people can be on the other side of this conflict.
Yeah, having known lots and lots of American Jewish radicals, being born to them, you know, not my parents, but many of them, that would be the case. They'd be like left wing on every single issue except for this one, in which case they'd be calling for war against children. So yeah, that's a lot. Some of that I didn't even know about, the degree of the harassment, the persecution, the suppression. What was the poll? Something like 1.5% of Israelis are opposed to the war now, something like that. I mean, it's almost nobody, right? I mean, you are almost all alone in that otherwise very liberal society. I mean, look at Tel Aviv. Go look at Instagram feed from Tel Aviv.
Liberal for Jews only.
Yeah, right. I mean, and it looks like a really nice place to live. I've never been there. No, I've known lots of Israelis. I've never been there, but I watch Israeli TV, and it looks like you built a nice country for yourselves there.
Sure.
I get why Jews love to live there, and others too. So they also don't seem to be experiencing the war. When I look at the Instagram feed from Tel Aviv, you see lots of pictures of people showing off their abdominal muscles and on the beach and having drinks and in a cool cafe, or You know, it's odd. I mean, then of course you plug in Gaza and it's nothing, as you know, it's nothing but dead children with limbs blown off. The isolation, the alienation, you guys have each other and you have your organization and you have the remnants of the Israeli left. I mean, we're talking about hundreds of people, maybe? Would you consider like actual thousands, actual anti-war? Okay. How about this one? Go ahead.
You do also have like if you are talking about like the Israeli society, like the Jewish Israeli society, then a few thousand. But you do also have our Palestinian partners.
Palestinian citizens of Israel. That's a bigger percentage that like believe in nonviolence.
I guess I mean, the Jewish Israelis. Let me ask you this. Let's go a little deeper. And I know that at least some of the members of your group, I think, identify as such. They certainly talk this way. Are you guys anti-Zionists or just critics of this government?
I think I consider myself anti-Zionist or post-Zionist. Like, I think like the toughest thing for me, in general, in the place that I live in, but specifically since the war, is how things are so black and white. It's either you're pro-Palestinian to a degree that you don't think that Israelis have the right to live or something, or like on the other side, completely pro-Israeli, and saying that any kind of criticism is anti-Semitic and going to that side. And in general, we live in a completely, like, there's two very different narratives in this place, and as Israeli Jews, we're not taught about the Nakba, the Palestinian history in general. We're not taught those things, and we have completely different perceptions of history and of reality. And I think that's like, it makes things very, very difficult. And like, I think that's a really big thing that can be really hard. And like, we are a few, but I think the reason is because people just don't know. They grew up in completely different, like, same reality, completely different stories. And like, it's crazy differences that it's really hard to explain. And I don't know, that you said that like Tel Aviv, the war isn't felt. It is felt. Like, people are in reserve, and everyone knows someone that was evacuated from the south, or someone that was murdered, or someone that's kidnapped. Everyone knows someone, both Palestinians. You go to the Palestinians in Jaffa, everyone has a family member, like a extended family that lives in Gaza. So it's connected to everyone, even though when you go to the streets of Jaffa and streets of Tel Aviv, you don't feel as if there's a war, but it's there, it's everywhere. I think I went far from your question, but
no, it's exactly, but well, we'll get to Zionism in a second, but that's more, maybe right now it's more urgent. Like, I'm getting at sort of the self-presentation of Israelis to the rest of the world during this. I don't know if you're aware, but like, a lot of us who are critics of this war, which, by the way, it's like 90% of the world, right, is with you guys. I mean, even most Americans, I don't know if you know this, but a poll just came out. A majority of people who voted for Joe Biden consider it a genocide. They think it's a genocide. So, I mean, anyway, no, the presentation. So I'm saying, if you you can plug in a location on Instagram, and you can just see like the live feed, whatever's raw coming in from that city in the world. Do that with Tel Aviv, and I'm telling you, you don't see almost any mention of it. And again, it's just a lot of pictures of like cocktails at the bar at the Sheraton and Jaffa.
Yeah, for sure.
I mean,
party town. It's a party city. Like.
Tel Aviv always is and always was. Going back, I don't know, from my grandparents' stories from the 60s, it was always like that. But I think maybe connecting that to Zionism is that this perception that we, like, as Israeli Jews, have like our security should be on behalf, like, that it's fine that it's on behalf of the Palestinian nation, is absurd. And I think exactly, you see that exactly is the Zionism in our reality today, like having Israeli Jews having their quote unquote like security and their protection and their like in our really like privileged and comfortable lives on behalf of the Palestinians. That's the Zionism that we see today. And yes, anti-Semitism is a very big problem, but solving it is not taking another nation's freedom in order to have so-called security for Jews. That's not true security when it's on behalf of other people.
Right.
And it's not freedom, it's not human rights when it's not for everyone.
Yeah.
So I think like that's what I really feel today. Like I don't resonate with Zionism because I feel like it's saying that we as Jews deserve more and deserve to live better than Palestinians, or maybe not to live better, but that it's legitimate. It's on behalf of them. And you can see that in Tel Aviv, and you can see that in how the government speaks abroad, and all the Israeli Zionists that are doing like Hasbara videos trying to like explain the pro-Israeli stance. You really see that belief that like first of all Israeli Jews deserve their rights, and then maybe if there's something left for others, but it's first of all us. And I think that's a problem here. And also looking at what's going on abroad, that you're saying that 90% of the people that voted for Joe Biden or the world, they said like are that what he said that most people in the world, most people in the world are on this side. But also when you look at that, it's also complicated because unfortunately some people, even though they're not pro-Israeli, they still look at the reality black and white. And I think like I don't believe in Zionism, but also I don't believe in seeing the reality so black and white and so in such a separative way, saying that just the Palestinians, it's just as worse, saying that just Palestinians deserve the rights, and it can come like on behalf of killing Israelis or displacing Israelis. That's also not okay. So I think really what's missing here is the pro human rights stance. That's not the pro-Israeli or the more radical pro-Palestinian. It's for both. It's for human rights, and it's for equality. So it's against Zionism, but it's also not against Israeli people.
Yeah. Go ahead, Iddo.
Yeah, if I can add to that, because living in Tel Aviv, you do sometimes really feel like there's no war. I do understand that, like, totally. I mean, at the start of the war, we totally felt that it's wartime because everything was shut down. But Tel Aviv's slogan is the city that never stops, because the whole point of this city is that it's the liberal center and the party center of Israel. So even like the people that are hurt here, at a certain point, they kind of feel that they have to, like, party through the war, because like they won't let anybody stop them. But that's exactly what we are trying to do in our activism, like to remind the Tel Avivians, because we live in Tel Aviv, but Israelis in general, that the fact that we live relatively securely does not contradict the fact that there is an occupation just around the corner, and now there's also the Gaza war just around the corner. And it also does not contradict the fact that we are actually not really secure. I mean, sure, most of the time we are totally okay.
But a war every summer is not security.
Exactly, but we have a lot of privilege, and we are very lucky to live pretty good and okay lives. But on the other side, even before this war, everybody here knows, like, people that died in a terrorist attack, people that died in the army. That's exactly the reason why we refuse to join this violence, to join this cycle, because the fact that we need to use violence against another people, use like horrible, harsh violence that is systematical is the only reason that we are relatively secure. And sometimes that security is broken. It might be a small thing, like me sitting in a restaurant in Tel Aviv and then getting a call from my father, there's like a terrorist attack like 200 meters from you. That's something that, I don't think anybody should live through. But on the other side, it's also sometimes the 7th of October that hundreds are kidnapped and killed. And also then you are supposed to protect this government that is not doing anything to better the better reality here. And you might die for that. You might die for the idea that we have to keep fighting forever. And that's exactly why we need peace.
It's a really big notion. And I think it's maybe important to understand abroad that it's a really big notion, saying that like we have no other choice and we're just meant to fight forever.
Right.
Yeah.
I am really concerned about people who live in Israel for the first time. I mean, and I have a friend who's a professor at the University of Tel Aviv, and he told me years ago, after the Second Intifada, he said that he's sure that there will be a nuclear bomb set off in a city in Israel in his lifetime. And he has 2 kids, both I think in the IDF, and I thought, well, that must be a sort of common feeling for people who live there. But now, I can only imagine there are being armies assembled all around your country. I mean, we've heard of young men who want nothing but to kill Israelis. I mean, the rage, the hatred, we don't even know the number of people who are now committed to killing all of you, or at least many of you, or at least waging some major military assault on your country. I mean, I've started to want to reach out to Israeli friends and maybe just suggest thinking about somewhere else maybe for a while. I don't know, but this is actually really scary. And I'm, what side I'm on here, but I'm actually, Israel, I just feel like has gotten to the point and done what we knew was going to happen was when Zionism was announced as an idea. When Zionism was announced as an idea in the 1890s, Herzl and all of them said, these people will refuse to be colonized. They will resist us. We must be at war with them forever. And here we are, 140 years later or whatever. And now you're killing 200 children a day or whatever it is to make this Zionist state continue. The hate, do you feel like, I know you understand what I'm saying here about the anti-Israel rage that's being stoked all around the world. It's a real existential threat to people living there. Do you feel like there are other Israelis who are cognizant of that, worried at all? Do they feel at all insecure about their place in this country now?
There are many people that left the country since the war started.
Yeah.
But I think the big problem is that people aren't abroad or mixing anti-Semitism and criticism of Israel. We welcome
Tell me about it.
of Israel, and we think it's I think we also criticize our country, and I think it's important that people abroad also criticize it. I think that it's important that every country is criticized, especially when a country is practicing an ongoing occupation for 75 years. I think that criticism is very welcomed and very important and critical to make things better here. We need also pressure from abroad, but mixing it with anti-Semitism is when the problem that's where the problem is. That's what I feel like, at least.
I'm saying that there's people have they don't have no need to be anti-Semitic whatsoever to want to destroy your country now. You know what I mean?
Yeah, but I'm speaking
frankly, but that's in the minds of millions of people now.
I know, but I think at the end of the day, it comes back to what we were talking about before, being pro-human rights. Yes, the Israeli government, the Israeli army are doing terrible crimes right now. That's true. But there are many people that live in this country, both with Palestinian citizenships and both with Israeli citizenships, Arabs and Jews, and some believe in violence and some don't believe in violence. And some maybe grew up into violence, but maybe one day they're going to change their paths. And I think that that's where the key thing is, to do that advocacy of looking at the complicated reality, looking at the people, criticizing, but also fighting for true complicated, for true human rights in the complicated way that it is, because that's how life is. And people are looking many times for the easy way and just choosing one side and completely condemning the other. But at the end of the day, like if you are really believe in human rights and you are a true peace advocator, then what you're going to do is look at the different kinds of people that are in this land, and not just at the governments, because the governments obviously don't represent everyone.
Are you for
Yeah,
a one state or a two state solution?
I think we are. I think we are for any solution that's better than
We're
right
for
now.
political solution. Right now, there's no solution on the
right.
table. So we're for a solution that secures peace and a respectable life for everybody living here, Palestinians and Israelis. Whether it's gonna look like a one state, a two state, a 2.5 state. Well, it doesn't matter. Like,
but is it? Okay, sorry. Go ahead, Iddo. Yeah.
I do believe that, like, I can be like pragmatic about it, because like, if in my opinion a two-state solution currently is something that is viable and a one-state solution isn't, then I will be for a two-state solution, because it betters the lives of Palestinians here and betters the lives of also Israelis, basically, but mostly Palestinians. It will end the occupation. But in the end of the day, if a one-state solution is something that can happen, then sure, I completely want to live with the freedom to move and see my Palestinian friends, and to not have this whole ethnic governmental conflict.
Yeah, I mean, am I right? You guys are calling for full civil and human rights for everyone who lives on that piece of land.
Yeah,
that's it. Period. Like after that, you don't have a position necessarily, but you just want all people who live in that place to have the same equal rights, correct?
Because that's the core. That's the core. That's the core thing, and that's what's important.
Which means the end of the Jewish ethno-state, right? If everybody has, I mean, which is what I think. That's, to me, that's the only way there's going to be peace, is the end of that thing, because that's the cause of it, right? Is that where you are?
Sure, but we are, the reason we are giving interviews, for example, to you and to other world news agencies, is because we want to explain and show to the world that Israelis are not like something like a monolith or something that everybody thinks the same. Sure, Israeli society is one of the most broken society. We have the most problems with Israeli society, but we are also humans. Like, in my opinion, humans will change, and I hope we are working so our society may change in a peaceful direction. And that's done in baby steps, because we have a fascist government. So when we are talking to people like you, we want to explain that every solution that will happen, whether that be a temporal solution, like a two-state solution even, or something like a one-state solution with no Jewish ethno-state, we still are advocating that Israelis should stay here. We were born here. We don't know anywhere else. Yeah. And in my opinion, also, an end to the Jewish ethno-state, for example, will only happen if Jews are also for that. I mean, right now we have millions of Jews here that have support from around the world, from other Jews also. We cannot just kick them out, because that, in my opinion, will not even work. Even if I would want that, which obviously I don't, because I want to live here. I want to stay here. So in my opinion, yeah, it will any solution will happen through cooperation of Palestinians and Jews here, that be cooperation towards, I don't know, a two-state solution, or even just stopping the war. That's like, we are working from day-to-day goals, you know?
Yeah, you're talking about really big questions that feel so far from us right now.
Oh yeah, they are. Oh, they are. I know.
Like
Unfortunately,
I know.
Yeah, like
but
we wish that was the thing that's on the table, but right now the main thing that's on the table is bringing back the hostages, stopping the genocide in Gaza. Like that's the two things that need to happen right now, and it feels those, like, it's important questions to talk about, but it also feels like very disconnected to what's going on.
So let's get back to what's like really real and connected. Let's get back to your lives. And so I've heard a couple mentions of, I think, Iddo's father, and I've heard you talk briefly about your family before. Let's talk about that. So, you know, it was easy to be an anti-Zionist in like 1948 or even 1958 before they started having children in that land, right? Because it was like, oh, go back to wherever you came from, or go to the United States, which was what my people did. Much better idea, I thought. But then they had children, and then those children had children. And now what generation are you guys? Fourth, fifth, sixth? When did your family emigrate to Israel?
Mine came just before the Holocaust. Like all my great grandparents came just before the Holocaust, just a few years, they felt that things are getting heating up, and they had the chance to escape, but they had family members that like were killed in the Holocaust, obviously.
Yeah. How about Iddo?
My mother is actually Indian. She was not born here, and she did convert to Judaism, because in Israel you have to marry your same religion if you want to marry inside Israel. That's a whole different topic, state and religion.
Yeah, I know.
But technically she's not from a Jewish background. But my father is Ashkenazi, and my family from that side did come. I think some came even in the 19th century, and my direct linking family came in like the First World War, like the tens of the 20s maybe. Yeah. And if I can add on that, like my great grandfather, which lived to see Israel, obviously, but did come here before it was created, was a Zionist, but on the other hand, at that time it was really different. I mean, that's a really interesting history to research, because somebody that is a Zionist somehow is still he was a writer, so he still went against the Nakba, and he still and he still had Palestinian friends. I mean, that's a really weird time to live in, that you can be a Zionist but also somehow go against the creation of Israel somehow.
I would call that an unresolved contradiction, you know?
Sure.
Like, okay, yeah. Like they haven't worked out what the logic of Zionism requires. And ultimately, like, it requires, doesn't it, displacement and apartheid on racial or racist
I think
grounds,
they had some utopian mindset also, but yeah.
I mean, if the Palestinians had just given up and accepted it, sure, you know, you would all be fine, but that's not the case. So so we're talking multiple generations in both families, and that means multiple generations of military service, I would imagine. And I think you've said that you had a grandfather who fought in
I had a grandfather that fought in the 67 war and the 73 war. Many years he needed to be in reserve. Really affected my family, obviously. And it's something that's part of everyone's lives, you know, like growing up as an Israeli Jew, like how life works is going to school, going to the army, then doing a big trip like in South America or India or something to like clear your mind and explore, and then you come back, go to university, get married, have kids. That's how life, the standard life is supposed to work. Like being a soldier is just like the next step after high school. That's how it's seen. It's your way to bring back, to give back to your country. That's
what's the requirement for men and women? There's a term of service.
Oh, women are required to serve for 2 years, and men for 2 years and 8 months. but every few years it changes a bit.
And it's almost universal, right? Almost, there's like some religious exceptions, and that's it.
Yeah, so there are it's not, you can't say that it's universal. There are religious exemptions that are for a very big part of society. A big part of religious people don't serve in the army. And also there are us conscientious objectors. There are people that get mental and medical exemptions. And it is varied. But conscientious objectors are like, we are a minority, and there aren't it's also the toughest exemption to receive from the military.
So tell me about yours. So you were 18, is that what we said?
I'm 20.
No, but then when it happened, when you
then
yeah.
I was 19. After high school,
19.
I did a voluntary year. I postponed my enlistment. I did a voluntary year, and then and during that voluntary year, I saw a conscientious committee who didn't accept my request for an exemption, and that's how I found myself on September 4th, 2022, coming on my enlistment date and refusing to draft. Me and 3 other guys, Aviatar and Shachal, the 4 of us decided, we had similar enlistment dates. We connected and decided to do a public refusal together, to voice our opinions. And I sat in military prison. I was sentenced 4 different times for the same crime, of like not enlisting. And in a total, I sat 87 days. And then finally, like, the whole time that I was in, there was a lawyer that volunteered to assist me, and she was appealing for me to see another conscientious committee. And only after those 87 days, I saw that committee. But going in, refusing, I had no idea if I'm going to sit in for like 2 weeks or for 2 years, like the refusers that sat the most in the beginning of the 2000s.
I keep thinking about your parents. So how did they feel about this? And who are they? I mean, are they political in any way, or what was their...
I will keep their privacy, but they are it was tough, like having your kids saying that they're not going to the army and they might be imprisoned for that is scary. Obviously, at the end of the day, when I was sitting in prison, they were just worried for me that I'm going to be fine and that I'm going to get out fast. So I'm lucky on that. I'm lucky on that case. I think an important thing to say is that refusing isn't necessarily a privilege, but going public about it definitely is. I know many people that somehow got mental or medical exemptions, but did it originally from political reasons, but didn't have the option to go public about it, or even to share their community, their family, their parents, their friends, because it can put them in danger, just as like that. Sometimes it can be very scary, and very, very tough. So in some way, I think like my choice to go public about my refusal was also to be a voice for all those silent refusers that can't speak up.
Yeah, I know that some of the refuseniks from your organization do come from very heavy military families with decorated, I think, officers in them who are, I guess,
it really differs. There's many kinds of stories. Each person comes from
others are like me. They're from like super left wing Jewish families, like right? Me, yeah. Where this is sort of it's easier politically to deal with. How about you, Iddo? What's your family like politically, and what's this been like for them? What are they thinking about this?
Yes, so my privilege is that I come from a very leftist family, and like both of my parents work in some political job. My father is a human rights lawyer. He in the past worked with Palestinians, now mostly does immigration cases. My mother is also works in a political organization. So I definitely come from a very accepting family. They completely accept the fact that I am not going to enlist. They are scared that I'm going to prison. They prefer me getting, for example, a mental health exemption. You know, you can pull some strings sometimes, you know, try and get a mental health exemption to add to like the fact that it's universal enlisting here. Yeah, the fact that it's forced upon you for sure, but a lot of people do not serve or do not finish their service. Like they go after 1 or 2 years maybe. Many for different reasons, you know, that it's not almost all of them are not for some political reason, but mostly
Mental reasons.
mental reasons, or
Yeah, looking at the IDF, it's like I think one of the main, or maybe the main reason for soldiers dying is committing suicide.
Oh, really?
That's the main or one of the main reasons of
not
soldiers
during
dying
war,
in the army, not falling in war.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people here want to go to the army, and I know people that want to go to the army but can't, you know, because the army does not want them. They got exemptions forced upon them. But going back to my family, I do come from a very leftist family, but they did not teach me that I'm not supposed to serve. They only taught me that I only knew that that's a thing, but I didn't know that I'm supposed to refuse or something, because even though they are very leftist, I was introduced to Palestinian family friends as a kid. I was taken to protests. They never like forced me on that, because here refusing is deciding to being completely isolated from society. Even in Tel Aviv, and mostly even in Tel Aviv, which is supposed to be a liberal city, like I said, everybody serves here. I mean, I do know people that get mental exemptions, obviously. I do know some people that refused, but a city like Tel Aviv is very militaristic also. I mean, you see hundreds of people with M16s in the street. You see soldiers in the street. The army knows like how to talk to different people. Like if the army wants to tell Israeli youth, Tel Avivian youth, why they need to serve, they might say, oh, if you serve in this intelligence unit, you will go out of that unit with a contract with Google, for example.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, stuff like that.
Having like, or in general, like high-tech companies, and it's seen as a way to get a good job. And in other places that are maybe more nationalist and then maybe less educated, then the motivation that the army gives to the youth is you're going to be able to be in combat and fight for your country. So really like targeting each different part of the society separately.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mean, the unprivileged Israelis are really taught that being in combat units, it's like a heroic thing, and it will give them basically some sort of glory.
Just like other countries, other countries.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's not special. It's not special at all.
So being born in Tel Aviv and having some leftist background opened the door for me to, in the end, know that I'm not going to serve. But for my whole life, I didn't really think weirdly about the fact that I will probably serve. I mean, till I started being political and a political activist at like 14, I thought serving is like just a regular thing, you know.
And your story is also very special, because having that political realization at 14, is important to say. It's very unique. It's not it's not an example for anything.
No kidding.
Yes. It's like I didn't know that refusal is an option until 12th grade. And that was also by chance that I came upon that option. So it's important to say that it's very unique, and most people form more political criticism and political ideas during their army service or in their 20s, even in their 30s. So special.
Are you guys getting harassed daily, weekly? Is it a thing? Is it are hate mail coming in, death threats? Like, what's going on? I know that Tal's gotten some of that.
Yeah, Tal did. I think that like I at least didn't get like very harassed. I do have a friend that like her videos were videos from the Kaplan protests were published again somewhere, and she got a lot of hate, and like she had like a scary few weeks, but like I personally luckily wasn't harassed.
Good. How about you?
I mean, on social media, for example, if you are public that you're against the war, you sure will get like hundreds of people that curse you, wish you death, wish your family cancer, you know, stuff like that. And the fact that I am in high school does scare me a bit, you know. Not to the point that I stopped being an activist, but a lot of people that I might not want to know that I'm going to refuse. I mean, I did understand through some friends that I have people in my grade that think that I'm a traitor, supporter of terrorism. I've heard that I need to my you know, my how do you say, my passport needs to be taken because I'm not in Israeli. But I do also have the privilege of living in Tel Aviv, which, even though serving is universal here, people won't physically attack me most of the time because I refuse. I mean, most of the people here are somewhat liberal and will not resort to violence. But on the other hand, you do, for example, we protest weekly. That comes with right-wingers that come to try and attack us. That comes with police officers that their job is to basically protect our right to protest, but they do not do that. They do the exact opposite. Every time they see some opening for them to attack us, they will grab signs that we are holding, arrest somebody. We have weekly arrests in the peace movement, basically. So so as a peace activist that does live in Tel Aviv, luckily, it's the violence and the repression is less personal and more systematic, in the fact that you might get threats online, you might get arrested or hurt by police.
Or have a policeman call you and threaten you not to organize a protest. Yeah. It's something that happens almost every week. It's not special. Or being scared to, I don't know, post something on social media, and like we do have the protection that we are Jews, so we meet less political sanctions than Palestinian citizens, like Palestinian Israeli citizens, but and we try to use that for the good, you know, the fact that we're Jews and we can say the same thing as a Palestinian Israeli citizen. They will be arrested for that, and we will just get like hate comments. So we're also trying to use that privilege, but it is scary, you know. Like we have activists that like have been arrested and activists that have been targeted. There was a very big article on mainstream media, I think maybe about a month ago, and that they really portrayed like a really big channel. They portrayed like a really long article portraying about 10 activists, targeting them, saying they're Hamas supporters and that kind of stuff, when it's activists that are just peace activists. Some of them practice productive presence in solidarity with Palestinians in the West Bank. Some of them do other kind of peace activism. And they were like, their faces were there in that article, and it was mainstream media, and they were just targeted, and it's very scary. Thank God all of them are fine, but it's very, very scary. Some fanatic can look at that and, you know, things can go bad.
Yeah, people have been doxxed, and people have been at the start of the war, some activists and a lot of them Palestinian citizens of Israel, but also I know a few that are Jewish, got far-right people protesting outside their house, basically threatening their families, because you have these people on the right that their whole way of attacking us is doxing addresses, doxing faces, names, and that's why we sometimes do go quiet about the issues here, because the fact that we have this privilege even to speak most of the time, we try and use it, but we do not want to hurt the people around us. We do not want to be hurt ourselves.
And we still think 10 times before we post something and before we say something. Yeah. And every protest that is organized, it's after many discussions of how to do it the right way that does portray what we believe in and the messages that we want to have, but also not put us in too much of a danger, and thinking of all the complications that can happen from right-wing fanatics, from the police, from the government. So really like mapping that out on every action that we do that's how we work.
Exactly. Yeah.
The Israeli right wing now, but for the last 20 years, but especially now, is like nothing anyone's ever seen. And the number of them, and especially the settlers, I mean, everything I hear out of settlers' mouths is just straight up religious fascism, and racist religious fascism, and they're armed to the teeth. Many of them obviously are very happy using violence. I'm not going to say all of them, but clearly many of them are. They certainly outnumber you and the peace movement, and they also have a history of killing fellow Israelis who had the wrong politics, including the prime minister.
Sure. Yeah.
So, you know, I don't want to make any sort of undue alarm here, but there is real material reasons for you to be scared for your physical safety. As an anti-war person in the United States, which I've been my entire life, you know, there's like a sort of a risk. I mean, sure, lots of people have guns, but there's very few people who are like so angry about the Iraq war that they're going to kill you for protesting against it. Not so, I think. It's been proven in Israel in the past. So, yeah.
Scary. It is very scary. You're right.
Sure.
But it's our home, and we have nowhere else to go, and we want things to be better. And we're trying to do our best. Yeah, it's a risk. Living here is a risk. Being an activist is always a risk. But that's the path that we choose every day. And I think it would be harder for us to live with ourselves if we wouldn't have done anything. And I'm sure that it also feels that way.
Yeah, I do feel that way, and I mean, sure. I mean, it's sure that it's scary. For example, since the start of the war, for the first time, I've seen, for example, the police that are standing by our protests have live ammunition loaded and ready in their guns. In the past, that was against policy. They were not supposed to have their safety off and, you know, be ready to shoot. And, you know, I just this weekend on Saturday, there was like a police officer with a M16. It's like they are from a special unit, and he kind of like adjusted his M16, and for a second it was just aimed towards me, basically. I was not scared that he might shoot me, but I do not want officers that I know that are violent, officers that I know that have right-wing politics, and come from this place of being higher than me, like, having the right to attack me if they want.
Yep.
I don't want them to have their guns drawn and ready. Other activists in the West Bank obviously have been shot at also. I mean, that's a completely different
Both
thing.
Palestinians and Israelis.
Yeah, you have Israelis, Israeli settlers shooting at other Israelis because they are with Palestinians.
Right.
And the government is the one that are giving these settlers the guns and the ones that are giving them the security to feel they can do that. I mean, you see now, for example, the Biden administration sanctioning 4 Israeli settlers. In the past 2 years, I can maybe think of 100 settlers that
it's
that
important, but it's a drop in the sea.
Yeah, I can think of 100 settlers that have video of them using violence against Palestinians, whether that be actually shooting a Palestinian or beating them up, So violence here, there are maybe leftists that can say, yeah, that the government has a monopoly on violence. But here, it's not only the government, it's also the settlers, also the far-right supporters of the government, because once you give a person like Ben Gvir or Smotrich a ministry that is also supposed to enforce the law, you get the results. You give a person that has been charged, I think in the past, he was charged, not only accused of, charged with supporting a terrorist organization, but a Jewish terrorist organization. So you give him the right to tell the police what to do, and then you get police violence ramped up to 1,000,
Yep. I've seen many videos showing exactly what you're describing. I want to finish by asking you about education. And I mean sort of the education that most Israelis receive. And then I want to hear about the education that you two received. And I know, Iddo, you're sort of special in this way because you had parents who probably taught you very differently, but still, what are you taught in the schools in Israel about Palestine? And then
we're not taught about Palestine. That's not a word that's said.
I know.
It's Arab Israelis.
Right.
Said.
For beginners, that's the first thing. But yeah, and then talk about, I assume you've both been in the West Bank.
Of course.
Yeah. So talk about that. And because I just think I tell American friends who don't know much about this, but sort of reflexively support Israel, I say, just look at a video of Hebron. That's it. Just look at one video of Hebron. That's all you got to know. And you'll see that this is an apartheid state. That's just obvious to me. But yeah, talk about first of all, what do they teach you all in the schools about Palestinians and Palestine and the Nakba and all these things, or they don't?
That's not words, like those 3 words, Palestinians and Palestine and Nakba, are not words that are in the books. It's not words that are pronounced. The only mention of Palestinians is around violent attacks, and that's it. The word Nakba isn't something that's talked about in schools. We're taught about the Independence War that happened in 1948, and there were some Arabs, they're called, that were some were displaced and some just left, and that's what we're taught. And we're taught how it's important to keep up the security of the country and be careful from the Palestinians, the Palestinian diaspora in the surrounding countries, and that's what we're taught. And I think the main narrative in the educational system here is using the Holocaust, which is very important to learn about and very important to make sure that it's not going to happen again, but using that memorial to justify
everything,
controlling everything, to justify controlling to controlling Palestinians, or as called in the educational system, Arabs, is that's the big problem, and that's what we're taught. If you even look, I think the most simple example is to see the dates of the memorial days. After Passover, there are 3 memorial days. first is the Holocaust Memorial Day. Exactly a week after is the Memorial Day for the soldiers that died in wars, and exactly the day after is the Independence Day. And that's just look at that. Just look at that and see what narrative we grow up into. Seeing that there's a wording used a lot in the educational system from Holocaust to how do you say tkuma? It's not to Mishualet tkuma. Mishualet tkuma. Yeah, I don't know how you say that word in English, but it's
from the Holocaust to
rise up.
Rise up, yeah.
Oh. To rise up or something like that. It's not the best translation, but that's the vibe of it, and that's what we're taught, that from the Holocaust, the only way to make sure that's not going to happen again is having a Jewish state and fighting whoever we need to fight, and that's what we're taught, and that's how important it is to serve in the military and everything. And we're not taught about the Nakba. We don't know the Palestinian narrative at all. We don't know that there was a military control on the Palestinians living in Israel until 1966. There are no talks about the West Bank, maybe a little about Judea and Shomron, how it's called in Hebrew, but there the West Bank is not something. It's not a word that's said.
Israelis but don't know. I mean, generally don't know that there are IDF soldiers inside the West Bank occupying.
They do know that.
They do know that, but it's,
okay.
It's for protection. It's for protection.
It's for protecting of villages. Like the word settlement in Hebrew, there's two different words. Like when you translate to English, it's settlement, but in Hebrew there's two different words. There's a word that says it's more like, I guess, villages or something, like yeshuvim. That's a neutral word, and there's settlements in the meaning of settling on like a ground that's not yours and that kind of thing. Okay. So it's seen as protecting the villages in the Judea and Shomron, because it's also part of Israel needs protection from terrorists.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. Go ahead.
Because I want to say something here that, to the international audience, I do want to clarify. It's very specific to my experience, and it's very specific to places like Tel Aviv. Obviously, I did not learn about the Nakba. Obviously, I learned that the Holocaust happened, horrible thing. That's why we need a state. Basic as that. If we don't have a state, then there will be a second Holocaust. Which people will do that Holocaust, I don't know. But the rhetoric in Israel is that people like Hamas are the new Nazis. So I was taught all of that, but I am lucky to live in Tel Aviv. I am lucky to go to one of the most leftist schools in this country, to go to because in Tel Aviv it is a bit more free. I have some awesome
It also
teachers.
really differs from an area and in different schools. You can't say that about the whole city.
Right.
Of course, yeah. Of course, yeah. In middle school and in elementary school, I didn't have any freely thinking and criticism of Israel teachers. But now in high school, I am lucky to have some really awesome teachers that are willing to risk their jobs and livelihoods to teach their students a little bit about Palestinian history, Palestinian movements, and also in general teach about activism in Israel. In the start of the war, a teacher like that was put on trial for I think supporting terrorism or inciting.
No, for betraying the country. That was what they blamed him. Meir Bruchin, a history teacher from Jerusalem, I think, I know about him. From Jerusalem. Right? Yeah, he was. And now when he's trying to go back to school, he's facing a lot of protests from the students, and it's very tough.
He's been harassed horrendously by his own students. Physical.
And that's because he's made to be an example. That's because the teachers that actually are trying to move from the status quo are risking their jobs and are being harassed by the municipality, by the school board. So I am lucky to be taught some of reality here. But me also, that, like you said, you want to talk about the education that I did got.
Yeah.
I did grow up in a leftist family, but they did not teach me so much about the reality here. I only knew that I'm a leftist, that Palestinians are humans, then they live beside me. But I
Which
didn't
is a
know
lot.
that, but I didn't know like the specifics. Yeah, that is a lot. I am lucky to know that, but I didn't know like the specifics of the occupation, what's happening in the West Bank. I just knew there was something happening. So kind of, so luckily, because I had that groundwork though, through social media, through the internet, through meeting some leftist groups from my parents, I managed to learn what's really happening in here and learn about the apartheid regime in the West Bank, learn about the occupation, learn about Gaza. And that's why 3 years ago, which is early, really early, I started being an activist, because how do you say, the reality broke, and I finally understood like what's being done in my name.
Wow.
Yeah. For me, like I did grow up in a Zionist leftist household. Like I'm not an example for a right-wing household, but a leftist Zionist household. And like I was taught, like my parents also scientists, so I was taught like of critical thinking and that kind of thing. So I think like using those tools, it really set me up to be able to criticize as an adult. But being like for me, what opened me up was I became involved in climate activism in high school. And through that, I met in the movement that I was active in, there were a few girls that are Palestinian citizens of Israel from the north, and we became friends, and it really opened up the first time it really opened up my politics, and like I did believe in like climate justice, but then seeing what that actually means and what is connecting different kinds of struggles. And it was the first time that I realized that we live in the same place but in completely different realities, and that really sent me off to look up more about what's going on and get more politically involved. But again, 12th grade. But it's all interesting also to see, like we have a good friend that also refused not long ago, that he comes from a very, very fascist right-wing household, and he did find his way to the left also at in high school. So it's interesting to see that like now with social media, it's really helping people that are a little more interested, a little more critical, to have an outlook for their questions.
If I can add one last thing.
Yeah.
We are refusing publicly because we want other people to know that refusing is a thing, and not going to the army is an option. Because obviously here it's compulsory. I mean, you by law you have to serve. So growing up in a normal family, why will you go against the law? But that's the reason why we are trying to create a movement, because refusers in the past, and I hope also future refusers, might get into political activism and in general just political thought through seeing other refusers, through the fact that they are going to the army, and then they realize, oh wait, there are people that do not go to the army, there are people that tell me that I don't have to go to the army. So the idea is not to be some heroes of the struggle or something. The idea is to create more of us. The idea is that one day this will not even be an issue that we have to face, you know.
The idea is to encourage people to critical thinking, to asking the questions too, looking for the other sides of the story that we're not told. And it's hard to look for those hidden stories, like the stories that are hidden from us. Maybe to the world they don't seem hidden, but growing up as an Israeli Jew in Israel, it's stories that are very hidden, and you need to look for them if you want to get to know them.
Remarkable. I want to say, I guess the final thing here, and just as I sort of said this earlier, but I don't know what you guys can see about the outside. I know you can see some things about what's going on outside Israel. But let me just tell you again, as someone who's been involved in this issue for decades and been an anti-war person my whole life, yada, yada. This is like nothing I've ever seen. I've had multiple people on my show who are lifelong anti-Zionists, famous ones, and they say the same thing. The movement, either against the Netanyahu government or against Zionism itself, is it's most of the world. The only people against you are the people who live in Israel and the government of the United States of America. But as far as I can tell, everyone else is essentially with you, or at least wants a ceasefire. And one of the reasons I wanted to have you on the show was simply to make that connection between this giant world of people out here who are with you and your tiny, tiny little island of resistance inside Israel, so that we're out here and that we know that you're in there. And I think some good things can happen from that, because whether you like it or not, as you well know, Israel is intimately intertwined with my country, and we might argue quite dependent on my country. And so the war ultimately actually is going to be won here. It's going to be won in San Francisco and New York and Chicago. When the United States stops it, the war will stop. And so this is why the movement here and in the West generally is so crucial. But I hazard to say very few people know about you all. I think maybe because there's so few of you, I don't know. I know you've been on Al Jazeera, a few other media outlets, but it's not known. And I've had multiple conversations, I've had multiple interviews with anti-Israel activists, and no one's mentioned this. I'm sure they know about you, but now the world does know, and they're going to know more and more. And I hope you will feel that going forward. So thank you for coming on.
Thank you very much. Thank you for inviting us. It's great to talk to you.
Good. I hope to visit someday, and I hope to visit both of you in person.
You're welcome.
Sure.
But yeah, best of luck, and good luck.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
This is the Unregistered podcast, and I'm Thaddeus Russell. To become a patron of the show and have access to bonus episodes, AMAs, and the Unreported News Analysis Show, go to patreon.com/unregistered. Thanks for listening.